Good morning. I'm afraid my Spanish is pretty poor, so this will be in English, which also means I have no idea what Pablo has just said. I hope it was the next speaker is called Sally Uren. I'm really delighted to be here. And it's just such a thrill to be here in Buenos Aires. I've never been before, and it was really worth the long trip. And I think you're in for a really great couple of days. So what I wanted to do today was to talk about this notion of brands as system innovators. But first, I'm very conscious that probably about 5 of you might have heard of me and might have heard of Forum for the Future. So just a bit of background, a couple of minutes about who Forum is, because it will give you an insight into my view of the world. We are an independent non-profit. We are an NGO. We're a non-campaigning NGO, so we were established 18 years ago, and I've been at Forum for 12 years, so a long time. We were established to help organizations, business, public sector, and others come together to try and find the solutions to these complex sustainability challenges. So we were established to really help organizations navigate through the complexity that is sustainable development. And for a long time, we worked just in the UK, but then we became really clear that actually in order to achieve impact at scale, in order to accelerate progress towards sustainable development, we needed to move out of the UK and start to work more globally. And today we have an office in New York and very small offices in India and Singapore. And in terms of how we work, we have long trust-based relationships with many, many businesses, some of them on the logos around you today. And we work with businesses to really help put sustainability at the heart of their strategy, at the heart of their products, their services. Some of the businesses with whom we've been working for many years are here. But increasingly, what we do is to bring organizations together to tackle shared challenges. It's increasingly obvious that the challenges that we face, the ones that we need to address to deliver a sustainable future, are too big for one brand, for one business to tackle alone. And what we need to do is something that we say at Forum, get the system in the room. We need to bring all the different actors that have a stake in the sustainability of a specific issue together. And just a couple of examples here. We've been running a major project in the global shipping sector for a few years now, and that's now spun off as a separate non-profit. And at the end of this month, we'll be launching some work looking at the future of US retail. And we do a lot of work in agricultural commodities too. The example here is tea, which I included because I know that Argentina quite likes its tea, and you grow a lot of tea here. So we've been running a big multi-stakeholder collaboration trying to understand what needs to happen to secure a sustainable future for tea. So that's enough about Forum. So why brands? I said a moment ago we're an NGO, and at the moment there's a lot of activism within the NGO movement to really point a finger at brands, because the accusation is, well, haven't brands got us into this mess? And by mess, what I mean are the impacts of overconsumption. So resource scarcity is becoming the new normal. We had peak oil, we now have peak water, peak soil, peak everything. We are running low on many vital assets. We're also looking at the impacts from a societal perspective of overconsumption. Rates of obesity around the world are spiraling high, and certainly in the developed economies like Europe and like the US, the cost of dealing with obesity now are outweighing the cost of dealing with impacts from smoking, for example. And at the same time, we've become a very materialistic society. This throwaway culture, we buy stuff, we throw it away. Maybe not you all in the room today, but certainly brands have been associated with fueling hyperconsumption and fueling the notion that, well, actually to buy things will feel better. Yes, a lot of that could be true. However, we know that in order to tackle these big sustainable development impacts, we need to move the sustainability conversation, even though I agree with Gabrielle, we may not call it sustainability, but we need to move awareness of these issues from the edge into the mainstream. And that's not happening at the speed at which we might like. Again, if you look at developed economies in particular, the cohort of the consumers out there, the citizens out there that are really actively motivated by sustainability and by ethical issues, by green issues, has stayed static for the last 5 or so years. It's growing more rapidly in emerging economies, but it's still niche. So we need to mainstream sustainability in business, in government, in civil society. Why isn't that happening? Because there are systemic barriers which are preventing this from being the norm. And these barriers are too big, again, for one organisation to tackle alone. And the 3 that I think are probably the most significant are the fact that the investment community doesn't tend to reward businesses for being sustainable. They tend to take a very short-term view, and oftentimes sustainability involves taking a long-term vision, driving long-term direction. Investors aren't good at rewarding that. If we look at local, national, and international policy when it comes to sustainable development issues, at best, it's incoherent. At worst, actually, it's stopping sustainable development. So we have this incoherent policy framework. And then, of interest to you all in the room, is the fact that mainstream citizens, so I'm talking about the people to whom sustainability doesn't mean a great deal, by and large, are disengaged from this agenda. That is changing, but not fast enough. So these are what I would describe systemic barriers to mainstream sustainability. And this is where I would argue, and Koan talked about this earlier, this is where brands come in. Brands, for me as well, and I agree with Koan, they're much more than a logo. They are the door to the business model, and they have a relationship with the end user. And we've done a lot of work at Forum on how do you create significant change? How do you deliver transformative change? And the first step is to experience the need for change. Unless, as individuals, as humans, we've experienced the need to do something differently, by and large, we won't do anything differently. That's why government-backed, behaviour-led change campaigns, usually they don't work. Because actually you can't dictate to someone, they must change their attitude. You need to experience that. And we know that people trust their friends and their family the most, and they trust big business, government, probably the least, but brands are somewhere in the middle. And so that's why we at Forum believe that brands have this potential to act as these agents of change and actually offer a real mechanism to address some of these systemic barriers to mainstreaming sustainability. And we've done quite a bit of work on this, little thinking, scratching our heads, saying, okay, well, if that's true, then how does that work? How is it that brands can deliver this innovation? How is it that brands can deliver transformative change? And we think there are 3 key ways in which brands can deliver this system-wide innovation. And I'm going to share those with you right now. They are leading the consumer on sustainability, connecting with research and development, and then influencing the wider system. And in turn, number 1, why don't we lead the consumer on sustainability? Why don't we use the power of brands to make sustainable living desirable and aspirational, and actually to give consumers perhaps something they didn't know they wanted? And brands can do this. Brands have a long and successful track record in doing this. The poster child, if you will, the really great example of a brand that has given millions of people around the world something they didn't know they wanted is Apple. And it started with the Apple Macintosh, where Steve Jobs said, well, hang on a minute. So at this point, PCs, for those of you old enough to remember, were dark screens, and you only had little arrows with which you could navigate through the screens. And it was really not very user-friendly. And so the Mac was the first PC that had a graphic interface. It was light. And what Steve Jobs did was he imagined a different world with a different use of technology. And then he brought the Mac to market with no consumer research. So often when you talk to brand folk, and particularly in retail, they'll say, oh, we need to go out and test the market, get insights. And I would say no, not when it comes to sustainability, because actually, who doesn't want to live a sustainable lifestyle? We all want to live sustainably in some way, shape, or form. So how do we use brands to create that pull and to make sustainability desirable? Another example is Method. They are an organization that put cleaning products to market. Not very interesting, not very sexy, if you will. However, what Method have done is reinvented the cleaning category, because what they saw what really needed to happen was that cleaning products have got lots of nasty chemicals in them. Not all of them, but many of them do. And they wanted to provide cleaning products to markets without the chemicals that, as one of the owners, one of the founders rather, said, if my kid picked up the bottle, I wouldn't have to rush them to hospital, because actually what they were drinking didn't contain all these toxic chemicals. And so what Method did was use their brand and use their design creativity to create bottles of washing up liquid, detergent, that actually looked really nice, but also used the brand, the marketing power, to make the whole conversation fun. So if Apple and Method can do that with A, bits of tech, and B, cleaning products, then why can't brands do this with sustainability? And I think that they can. The second way in which brands can act to create system-wide innovation is to be the superhighway between the R&D lab, where all of this clever thinking goes on, people in white lab coats, and the activation in the market. There's lots of innovation happening at the moment, lots of great ideas bubbling up in laboratories around the world, but they're not making it to market for lots of reasons. But one is that they're not closely enough linked in with the brand. So how do you put your brand power, the reach that you have with your brand, together with all of those research insights, and actually catalyze change by really fueling innovation? And key to doing this is, again, looking to the future. And the example I wanted to share with you today, it's a strange picture, you might be wondering what that is. It is, in fact, a toy and a little device for looking at videos and looking at the weather conditions. But actually, it's more than that. We did some work for Sony a couple of years ago now, where we created future scenarios, which is something we do a lot of, future possible worlds, to look at how might technology allow us to lead more sustainable lifestyles. Because we know that tech has got a lot of positive attributes, but we also know that we have this throwaway culture. I imagine quite a few of you have more than one mobile phone sitting at home somewhere that you've upgraded, got the next model. And so we started to imagine a different use of technology and came up with Wanderer, which I won't explain where the name comes from. I can tell you later if you're interested. There is a story. But effectively, Wander is a device that grows with you. At its heart is a core, which is a device that downloads data from the clouds, that evolves with you. And as a child, it's in your favorite toy. And then as you grow up, it becomes part of other devices. But it's the same core. And the reason why we felt that Wanderer was important, because it gets over this emotional durability issue. You love the objects in which the core sits so much, you don't want to throw them away. It's a bit like having that trusted watch that's been with you for a long, long time. And what we did was prototype Wanderer. These devices here were exhibited in the Design Museum in London, and they're now on a tour around the world to show how these future concepts might work. But critically, in January of this year, Sony launched the core. So that central device is now part of one of their new wristbands. So the point here is that if you can go into the future, imagine a different way in which your brand brings sustainability to your end consumers. You can then prototype new products and bring them to market much more quickly than if you left the brand out of the conversation. And then another example is some work we're doing with Ecover, who now own Method, who I talked about a moment ago. Again, make lots of cleaning products, very, very big. They, again, with our help, to look to the future and actually saw a resource-constrained world where global distribution, global manufacturing might not work so well. And so this is a pilot on the island of Mallorca, just off Spain, where we're looking at a closed-loop way of producing cleaning products. And Ecover's dream here is to move from a business reliant on global manufacture and global distribution to acting as a catalyst for local distributed closed-loop manufacture. And it's only doing that because it looked to the future as a spark for innovation. And they're getting close to producing the first new cleaning product. So the third way in which brands can create real change, and for me, this is probably the most critical way, and we need to see more brands thinking like this, is to shape the world around them, to shape that external context, to achieve the conditions in which the brand will succeed. And a brand that does this really well is Nike. So a few years ago now, Nike said that it wanted to only use 100% recyclable and sustainable materials, and it wanted to be a totally closed-loop business. That's quite a big ambition, and they realized quite early on that they couldn't do this on their own. And one of the big shifts that they needed to create was, how do you get truly sustainable materials to market in the volumes that actually are viable for a big global brand like Nike? The answer is not on their own. And over a year ago now, they launched a collaboration called Launch with NASA, the US Space Agency, to really harness different insights to understand how do we create a truly sustainable material. But creating the material isn't just the only solution. You've also got to create the demand for the sustainable material. And so what Nike have also done is developed an app called the Maker app, which is free for designers to download, and it helps them specify sustainable materials. And so what you see with Nike are a number of interventions which are designed to shift the system around them so that they can deliver that ambition of a closed-loop business, truly sustainable, but have also created a sustainable system around them. And other brands are beginning to do this. Unilever is a great example, although the video that was showed as we walked in, which is in fact the third time I've seen it, but as Pablo, who sat next to me, could testify, it made me cry still. You'd think I was kind of more inured to this. But what Unilever are doing is saying, actually, we're not just about selling goods and services. We want to do our bit to create a sustainable future. And so the whole Lifebuoy story is a way of addressing really systemic issues associated with childhood mortality in some parts of the world. So we're seeing more and more brands understand that to be truly successful and to be truly sustainable, they've got to change the system around them. So they're the three ways: lead the consumer on sustainability, create the story of sustainability being aspirational, desirable. Don't communicate the same story as sustainability as being worthy, a bit dull. Connect your research and development with future insights to spark innovation. Don't funnel your innovation into niche green products, because that's not going to transform the system. And then create the conditions for change. Don't think that individual brands can do this on their own. They can't. And the trick to working in these three levels, and of course the three levels are not mutually exclusive. You can adopt all of them at the same time, and indeed that's what Nike is doing. But the trick is to bring the sustainability function together with the marketing function and find that part of the conversation, that part of the space between those two functions in a business, so you understand where can sustainability drive the brand and where the brand is driving a sustainable future. So in other words, the sustainability and the marketing functions aren't separate, they're the same. And they're aligned around creating a truly sustainable brand. And also, what's critical to success in activating these levels of innovation is being really clear on your purpose. Now, the cautionary tale here is a tale that's well known in parts of Europe and in the US. And it may well be known here, but I'm not sure. If it is, I apologize. But it's a really interesting tale. So Kodak, been in business for many, many years, selling camera film. And they were the first company and were the first to patent a digital camera a couple of decades ago now. But they didn't bring that digital camera to market because they were worried that selling the digital camera would cannibalize the sales of the camera film. And they filed for bankruptcy 2 years ago because, of course, where have we all gone? Digital. That's how we capture our memories. And that was the purpose of Kodak, was memories, was that emotional recollection of that great day that you had. It wasn't about the film. So Kodak's purpose was not selling camera films. It was selling memories. It was selling emotion. They didn't understand that until it was too late. So be clear on your purpose. And then finally, we're having a lot of quotes this morning, and this is one of my current favorites. Going back to those sustainability challenges that I talked about at the very beginning, resource scarcity, chronic health disease burden, the list goes on. We must remember, as this very wise gentleman tells us, we can't solve these problems with the same thinking that we used to create them. We need to think differently. And my challenge for all of you in this room, in this wonderful city of Buenos Aires, is to think through what's the one thing that you're going to do differently to do your part in creating a sustainable future. Thank you very much.